Okay, welcome back to the show, and I've got a special guest on the show, a man that most of the people that watch my channel would have definitely seen on various channels, such as his own, the Two Man Power Trip Wrestling and Hannibal TV. Mr. John Poz, how are you doing today, man?
I am doing good. Thank you for having me. What's going on?
Yeah, good to have you. I like kind of connecting with people. Like I do interviews on my channel, but I don't keep it to pro wrestling. I like doing kind of movies, TV, different things like that. And I've kind of just started chatting to other people in the community that interview people. Like I've had Hannibal on, I've had a couple of the boys from Cafe de Rene Dupree's podcast and stuff
Oh
like
yeah,
that. So I think it's nice to kind of just talk to people about their own kind of projects. So delighted to have you on today, man.
awesome. Thank you for having me. And I know all those guys, so thank you. Very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. So look, yourself, obviously you're a massive wrestling fan. So how did the love of that begin first? We'll talk about.
Well, really, probably mid '80s. I can't even remember the exact time period, but I would guesstimate. I was so young; I was probably about three, so it's probably about 1985. My dad liked it; he watched it, but it's funny he didn't. He kind of like slow played it. Like I found an old picture of him. This had to be from like 1980 or 1979. Picture Polaroid of him and Fabulous Moolah, and then I found out he did. Insurance work with Pedro Morales, and then through his work, he would be sometimes sending guys to go meet the wrestlers because he his part of his company they sold toys was like a different brand of the company, and
Okay.
they'd have a warehouse, and in the warehouse, they have the wrestling figures come in. So I was like, oh, he knows more about wrestling than I thought. But then as you're slowly, you're getting into it and you're watching it, my older cousins were watching it. They used to have the stand up Hogan. So I'd say about 85 discovered Hulk Hogan, discovered the WWF, and then like the rest is history. But loved the immortal Hulk Hogan. He was one of those guys you looked at, you're like, oh my god, this guy's it's like a Greek god. Like this isn't like a real person. I know they would. Gorilla Monsoon always joke around like he's the greatest professional athlete, but to me as a kid, you don't really think about it. He's not really that great of an athlete, but to me, in my head, I'm like, this guy, he is the best athlete. What a freak! He's just a monster of a man. The charisma was through the roof. Just, I loved Hogan. That was kind of the beginning of it, and I never looked back.
Yeah, and you got to interview him as well recently, which was cool. I seen him on your
Yes,
channel. How was that?
yes, amazing. Sometimes it's just you're better to be lucky than good, and I was just super lucky to be able to get Hulk on because I know everybody would say, "Oh, at the top of your list, who do you want to interview?" Probably Hogan was definitely at the top of my list, and to be able to interview him and get him on was insane. You had to fight back the nerves a little, but unbelievable to get him on. That was the ultimate of ultimate guests I always wanted on was Hogan. So I was like, "Oh, holy shit! I can't believe I just got him on." It was a short interview, but still, just to be able to get him on
Yeah.
at all was amazing. I couldn't believe that he agreed to do it. So it was awesome.
So now you have to try and top Hogan, and obviously he's like your number one guest ever.
Yeah, Vince, I guess, and it's funny. I threw an email out there not that long ago. Never heard back, of course, but and obviously he had his problems. He had some troubles come up
Yes,
along the
yes.
way. But I guess Vince would be the only guy that I could think of that could top him.
Yeah, I think he's going to lay low for a little while though.
Yeah, yeah. There's something tells me he's going to be never doing interviews ever again. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. There's actually a show coming out next week on Vice, and they actually took a little snippet of one of my podcasts for the show, which I'm interested to see. It's going to be
Oh,
a 2 hour special. You probably know about the 9 lives of Vince McMahon is what it's called. So
awesome.
I'm guessing, judging by the name of the show, it's just going to be 9 things. But I don't think we're going to find out anything new in this. I think it's just going to be looking back at 9 Vince type stuff that went on, I guess.
Sometimes though I like that because it's almost like let's get a refresher course on what this guy, did and what he was up to. Just maybe it's nothing new, but it's going to be interesting regardless. And those guys always do a good job, so I think it'll be good. What they take from your show? What were they using?
They were using a little piece from Mario Mancini, and he was talking about what Rita Chatterton told him back in the day. And
Oh, oh,
so, yeah, so it's pretty serious stuff. But from what I gathered, I was lucky enough to interview Rita. She's hasn't done any interviews in the last 30 years except for myself. And I was just in the right place at the right time kind of thing, like you were talking about before. And
yeah,
obviously, they must have reached out to her and she didn't want to do it. And I guess they're just going to take what Mario said on my show for it because
yeah,
she didn't talk about it in detail on my show and she didn't want to because that's been addressed before and I think it's kind of personal to her and she didn't really want to go back down into that kind of
yeah,
thing again.
yeah.
And I was cool with that. I didn't want to push. I don't like pushing people into stuff they don't want to talk about. And I know you're the same, like in your show.
Yes, I totally agree. Don't do that. I even had somebody on recently. We went down a road and he's like, He's like, I didn't really want to go down the road, but he kind of steered me down it. And then I go, you know what? I'll just edit it right off, and we don't have to put it on there. So I sent him the copy and said, look, because like, I just took that crap out. It took me 2 seconds. I just edited it right out, and he was
Yeah.
cool with it. So that happens. But Rita, it's funny. A buddy of mine was doing a convention, tried to get her, wouldn't do the convention either. So I guess she doesn't want to do
Oh,
anything with
really?
wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah, she hasn't really done anything. Like I was I used this StreamYard and I sent her the link and it just was her connection was really, really bad. So we ended up using Zoom. It was just a really bad kind of shame that the connection was so bad. The audio was fine, but I like having the kind of YouTube stuff like you.
Yep.
And just when you look back on the quality of the YouTube, it's kind of shit. But I know I'll never get a chance to do it again. So it is what it is.
No, it's a rare interview. Yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is like you started podcasting really when there wasn't that many podcasts going. Like, so do you want to
Yeah.
tell us exactly when you started? Now, like the next door neighbor and his dog have a podcast.
It's so funny. It's like, wow, back in 2015 when I started, technically Conrad wasn't even like really doing his thing. I think he might have been doing something with Flair, maybe 14 or 2015, somewhere around there. But it's just funny to think like, he's like the podcast god. But it's funny, like at that point, even really he wasn't doing it. I mean, I think it was like maybe Conan and Colt Cabana and maybe like Honky Tonk Man was kind of before that, just for a tiny bit, but it felt like there was really not that much out there. And then all of a sudden, after 2015, my God, to now, I think it's like a million podcasts, probably 38 million wrestling podcasts or whatever it is. It is a lot, but in 2015 is when I first started.
Yeah. How do you try and carve out a little piece of the market for yourself in today's kind of world? Or do you feel that because you started in 2015, you were kind of ahead of the curve? And do you have to do anything differently these days than you did back then?
The only thing is, I guess you kind of work ahead of the curve because so many people, like, you're doing interviews too, and like that was kind of different. And when I first started doing, because not everybody was just doing the interviews. It was more like Cole Cabana would sometimes be interviewing his friends, but then he could kind of go off and do stories about whatever, selling socks or whatever, whatever he was doing. So
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where kind of try to stay ahead of the curve, but I love sticking with the interviews. So the only thing that I try to do is almost go for some rare guests or maybe some guys you haven't heard. Yes, I got to go for the big names too, but sometimes maybe some rare guys you've never heard of, or like Lance Von Erich had on. I know he did a few other shows, but try to get guys on like that who don't do a lot of stuff. So that's the only way to kind of really differentiate yourself if you're doing interviews, because everybody can kind of get the same guys and do the same stuff, but maybe get some rare guests, change it up a little bit, maybe just talk about some different topics that haven't been discussed, or go down different avenues that maybe they're haven't really talked too much or haven't delved into too much. Like for instance, I know maybe a lot of people might know the Necro Butcher, but I was talking to him and I was talking to him about ROH versus CCW. It was one of my favorite feuds ever. I
Yeah.
love that feud. And he was like, God, I don't talk about that often. So I was like, wow, that's interesting. So kind of like in that vein, I know that might be a little niche per se, but in that vein is what I like to try to go for sometimes.
Yeah, like I look at my channel, I've had some pretty famous people on, even outside the wrestling world. Carl Baskin from Tiger King, Chris Hansen from
Oh,
NBC, different people like
wow.
that.
Awesome. Yeah.
But then like I guess because they do so many big TV things, it's like when they come and do my show, maybe the views aren't that high. Like, and then I find like the rare guests, like as you say, like my top three podcast views are all from Mario Mancini, a wrestler you probably know from
Oh, yeah,
the
of
80s and
course.
90s. Mario,
Yeah.
because he's a great storyteller and he's got crazy stories, but like
Yep.
they're all really, really interesting. Is he a guy that you've interviewed?
No, believe it or not, but was touching
You
base with
should.
him. I want to say a few months ago, trying to touch base and get something connected. So hopefully, it's funny. Sometimes the timing doesn't really work out because I know he did something with Hannibal recently. So sometimes the
Yeah.
timing doesn't work out. You don't take it personally, and just you try to figure out at another time.
I talk to him on a daily basis. So I'll get you two guys in touch.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Because
He always has awesome stories. Like I forget who Hannibal brought up. Damn it, now I can't remember. But that's the clip I was like drawn to because I was like, oh, that's interesting. You're like, huh. Not so much like, oh, well, Hulk Hogan or Andres. It was something different. I forget who was it, but it's on his channel. I was like, oh, that's an interesting thing. And he had a 5-minute story about them. So it was like good stuff.
yeah, could have been maybe David Schultz breaking his nose or something like
Oh,
that.
I love Dr. D. Sometimes,
Yeah.
which is insane to think, sometimes he'll randomly text me Dr. D. I was like, and I'm like floored by it. I was like, oh my God. Because when he never really did interviews, I was one of the first guys to really get him on. I know he's done a bunch since, and he had that great Dark Side of the Ring episode. But I was like,
Yeah,
man, this is so cool. And who, maybe even you with Mario Mancini, like so cool and so weird. It's like this guy, he's famous. It's like texting me about God knows what for God knows what reason, but it's awesome. The fan in you,
yeah,
like, oh, that's pretty
yeah,
damn cool.
yeah. Sometimes I try not to think about it. Like sometimes I was meant to have an interview and I can't really say. I'll tell you off air who it was, but it was a pretty
Okay.
famous guy in the wrestling world a while ago, and I was kind of like, shit, I'm a bit nervous about this, but it didn't happen in the end because it was through an agency. This guy was over here in the UK and Ireland doing some stuff which I'll fill you in on, but the agency fucked it up. Like I find that when you're trying to interview someone, it's way better just talking to someone directly. I think when
Yes.
agents and other people become
Yep.
involved, have you found that?
Oh my God, I hate that. The third party, you're going
Yeah.
along, you're going along, you're going along. You do your research. Maybe you don't really
Mhm.
need to, but I love to overdo it and get some little tidbits and just get a one quote unquote one sheet going of like where you want to hit and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, oh, they can't do it. They canceled. You're like, oh God, I wish I was just talking to them directly because it would have happened, would have went down, or you could have texted them and communicated with them like, oh,
Mhm.
5 o'clock doesn't work. Okay, I can do six, I can do seven. Like you could play off with them and see, oh, you only have 10 minutes instead of 15, or hey, I got a half hour and instead of an hour. It's much better when you're talking one on one. Whenever you're dealing with the third party, it's like a crapshoot. Maybe like a 20% chance. You almost know, like now that I've done this so
Yeah.
long, it's almost been 8 years. I almost know I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna pencil this one in instead of write it down by pen. You're just penciling in on the calendar.
Yeah.
You get that
Yeah.
eraser ready whenever because they're gonna screw it up always.
Yeah. That's why I didn't advertise it. Like I knew that there was a
That's the other
chance
thing
this
too.
was going to
Never,
happen.
yeah, never advertise something. Yeah, because
Yeah.
somebody
I.
recently I saw they were advertising this person, and I was like, and they weren't lying. So there was some communication, but I'm guessing it was through somebody else. And I never
Yeah.
asked them, but I wanted to be like, you probably didn't talk to them directly. And the person canceled. They did. I saw they did another show or something, but it was through somebody. It was through a major thing. So I was like,
Mhm.
wow. I wonder if they were dealing with a third party. Third party told them yes. They announced it. Then they kind of had to backtrack because the third party canceled on them. Yeah, that's probably what happened.
Yeah. It's happened to me now twice with these musicians I've tried to get on. And there's an American band. I'll also unname them for the moment because I don't want to
Yes.
fucking shit on
Yes.
anyone because it's not their fault. Like these guys probably don't even know that I'm trying to get an interview with them. It's these
No,
agents and
no.
whatever.
Yep. Yep. They have
So
no
that's
clue.
the thing. So I was trying to get this guy on. He's singer of a band in America. So they're coming to Ireland next year. So I sent an email back to the original guy I was talking to, and he was like, "Yeah, let me put you in touch with the European people." So then I'm in touch with the European people, and she's like, "Oh well, who are you?" And it's just starting
Yeah.
from square one again.
Yep.
Crazy.
And then I love it. Like they told me to contact you. You almost forwarded stuff. Like they told me, nope. Who are you? What do you want? Yeah, I hate that. Oh man,
Yeah.
that's why when I was talking to Billy Corgan, obviously Smashing Pumpkin
Yeah.
fames, direct. I was like, oh, thank God, because at first I thought it'd have to go through the NWA. He said give him my info, so we were talking directly. I'm like, oh, thank God, because I hate
Mhm.
that going through somebody else, even if it's NWA, and they have great PR. I love dealing with the people over
Mhm.
there, but sometimes it's like either they have to contact him and get a schedule and then come back to me. So if it's just me and him, it's just so much easier. Everything just runs so much smoother. Even if they have to cancel or change the time, you don't have to deal with the third party who's going to take extra time getting information to you. It's just so much easier. They always screw it up.
Yeah. One. It's the music one that's really kind of tricky for me normally when you get guys in bands and stuff like that.
Yes. Yep.
One of them actually took a full year
Mm.
to smoothen out until I got it, but it worked.
Oh, I believe it. Oh my God. I've
Yeah.
had a guy, pretty famous wrestler, took me about a year to get him, but I was talking to him directly and he's like, I can't do it this day. Yeah, I could do it that day. Oh, did I say that? No, like it was, oh my God, it was nuts. I was like, holy shit. Like this guy, he is crazy. And if anybody knows,
Yeah.
like, or if you figure out who it is the guy's nuts, but crazy to think like that could happen, but it does. And I just was
Yeah.
like, okay, kind of stayed
Yeah.
persistent, but backed off a bit, was just like, all right, I was
Yeah.
waiting for him to say he can do it.
Have you ever recorded a podcast that you just couldn't air for one reason or another?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Okay.
That
Without going
slip
into details, you
Yeah.
could kind of
See,
yeah.
that was like a slippery slope too, because if you released it, there might have been some legal ramifications. I don't know if
Mhm.
I necessarily would have got in trouble, but I just didn't want to risk it. So I was like, you know what? I'm probably not going to air this and air on the side of like, Ugh. But I've also had one that I didn't air because it just sucked. So I just never aired it. And the interview was terrible. I was like, it's like, and I
Hmm.
never redid it. But I'm like, man, I wonder if we should redo it. I remember there was another time, same semi-famous wrestler. He said, "Can we re-record it?" And it was kind of the same questions, and it was basically the same interview, but he, I guess, said a few kayfabe things. He didn't want to kayfabe, like he wanted
Yeah.
to keep it kayfabe. He kind of opened up a bit too much, so I said I could just edit it out. He goes, "No, let's just redo it." So I've redone one. I haven't aired one because it sucked, and I haven't aired one for like legal reasons. I actually deleted it too, which is probably maybe I should have kept it, but I deleted it too. And it was like, fuck it. I'm not gonna go down that road.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine before, and he used to be in the podcast game, and he interviewed a very famous wrestler, and he said something that ended up like triggering the guy, and he just fucking absolutely went crazy on him, calling him you fucking idiot, and you this and that, and he just didn't release the interview. The guy went off the wall. That hasn't happened to me, thankfully.
Man, it must have been pretty damn uncomfortable. That's crazy.
Mm. But
Man, I can't even
what's your
imagine. Oof. That's
yeah?
horrible. I can't even imagine.
I'll tell you off air again.
Oh yeah,
But
okay.
who's your favorite guest that you've had on?
Well, the Hulkster, definitely, he ranks up there very high. I mean, he's a god. I mean, it was a short interview, but still, he's a god. Loved him. But just some
Yeah.
other guys that I just loved having on. They were so awesome. Was like Jerry the King Lawler, such a good guest, such good stories. You could give him like an inch, and he takes it a mile. Such a good storyteller. You'd be like, oh yeah, Andy Kaufman, this, and then boom, 5 minute great story about Andy Kaufman. Some other great guys. Loved having Terry Funk on. He was awesome to get on. Funny, people were saying like his memory, his memory, his memory, and maybe that's more of like a short term thing, but his long term memory was great because I'd be like 1993 and he'd remember specific dates and
Wow.
specific things. So it's like, okay, I think maybe it was excuse me, easy for me to say, an exaggeration that he was having like memory issues and stuff. But man, I would mention some to me. He's like, man, I remember on the ranch in January 3rd, 1993, and I let him borrow my Buick. And like, he had like this whole, so I was like, man, the Funkster is awesome. And he's just so funny because he'll keep it kayfabe, but he'll give you stuff. You know what I mean? Like he'll say he hates Jerry Lawler, hates Flair, they're dicks, and all this other stuff. But then he'll give you cool stuff surrounding them. Always, I don't know. I just like some of like the rare names like a Lance Von Erich just because it's so cool to get that guy on just because he disappeared from wrestling for 35, 40 years.
Mm.
Um, Guys like that are cool. Maybe Jerry McDivitt might be one of my favorites. That would be lead attorney, Vince McMahon's attorney. That is like the rarest of the rare. He's one of those
Wow. Yeah.
things. He's one of those guests too, where it's like, can I say this? Can I say that? And he's like, you got carte blanche. Say whatever you want. If I don't want to answer it, I'll figure a way out, and I'll just won't answer it. Or
Yeah.
I'll answer it the way I feel like I want it. So you didn't even have to prepare him or tell him, hey, can we talk about this? No, we can't. Like, and basically anything I asked him, he answered. So McDivitt's up there, Funk, Lawler, Hogan, Ric Flair. God, how the hell can I
Yeah.
forget about Nate? Hey, getting Nate and get him on for a significant amount of time was nice too, because I thought we had a short window and he kept wanting to go. So, I mean, that was just awesome. Had Sting on, which was a freaking blast, one of my all
Yeah.
time favorites. So, there's a bunch of guys. Foley was so cool, had him on twice. He was so cool. JBL was awesome, gave me all the time in the world. So I've been pretty damn lucky and pretty damn fortunate. Had a bunch of awesome legends who were pretty damn cool to me anyway. I mean, they were just unbelievable to interview. Vader was
Yeah.
awesome when I had him on. So I mean, I can I think I've interviewed over 1,000 if I count all the interviews together. So
It's
I could
crazy.
probably go on forever. But I mean, there's Sid was fun, even though he's crazy as hell. He was fun. So there's a lot of good guys.
Dream guest then. Who's left on the list for you?
I always say this, Bret Hart. He's one of those guys through a third party about 3 times. Is supposed to get him on date, time, everything. Third party canceled each and
Fucking
every
third
time.
parties.
Yep, each and every time. And I was like, God damn it. Even one time I went through a family member and he swore it was going down and it did not go down. So Bret Hart would definitely be. And then a close second, Brian Danielson, one of my favorite wrestlers ever. Loved him. But Brett Danielson and maybe Rick Martel, just because he's so damn rare. And I actually was
What about
supposed to get him on,
what
and
about
he didn't want to do it.
what about Steve Austin? Have you interviewed Steve?
Hmm. No, but he would be in my top 5 for sure too. I didn't even think
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve Austin too. I've tried to get him, didn't want to do it. per somebody else
Okay.
that had asked him for me. I didn't want to do podcasts or whatever. So, well, I
Yeah.
mean, which is fine. He doesn't do a lot of stuff anyway. He's the second biggest star of all time to me, next to Hogan, but he just didn't want to do it either. But he would definitely be up there. And like a guy like Booker T, I somehow has evaded me. I still haven't been able to get on. Easily one of my favorite guys. So I would love to get him on.
I'd actually like to talk to Kane. I'd say he's got some good stories.
Oh
Ken
yes,
Jacobs.
I've interviewed him 4 times actually. Now that I got to think
Really?
about it, yes, he's awesome, so
Very
cool.
intelligent guy.
Yeah, so down to earth too. Because you would think like, okay, well, he doesn't want to come on some podcast, but he does, and like talk about Smoky Mountain Wrestling and talk about like random stuff that you wouldn't think like a guy like him would want. You think like, oh, let's just hit the generic you were Kane and like that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But no, he was so cool. He wanted to talk about other things and other topics. And he was really, really just a bright guy and awesome to guy that talked about wrestling, loves the business.
Hmm. And how did you end up on Hannibal's channel then as well? Because obviously he's got a huge channel. He's used a few clips of mine and a few shows that we've done together as well. It's funny, like he asked me, "Oh, do you mind if I use this clip?" Because Buff Bagwell was on my podcast and he talked a lot of shit about Hannibal. And I
Oh, he
said,
did.
"Look,
Oh, wow.
I was like, I like Buff and I like Hannibal, and like
Yeah.
I don't really want to get involved in this." It was one of those things where it wasn't a question or anything. He just said, "And Hannibal," and then he just fucking went out on
Mhm.
Hannibal. And I just sent it over to Hannibal and said, "Look, I didn't set this up or anything like that, but I just want to let you know that Buff said all this." And he said, "Oh, can I use it?" And I said, "Can you use it on your 375 plus thousand subscribers channel? Of course you can fucking use it. There you go."
Yeah.
But then
So
Buff was kind of like, but Buff then kind of thought that I was in with Hannibal and all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, I
you
don't get
sent the guy
involved
the
in that
clip
side
and
of the
you ripped
world.
him. Yeah, you ripped him. Come on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I probably known him since 2016, I want to say. Just I interviewed him a bunch, and then he would come. I used to run a couple of conventions. He came to the convention and filmed some stuff. There was a couple other conventions that I had guests at, and he asked if I could set up interviews for them. So really, just kind of been friendly with him for the years. And he would say, "Hey, man, who have you interviewed lately?" Or who do you got? So we always just kind of exchange content, or he always want some of my interviews and stuff. So pretty much just known him forever, and he likes some of the content. He likes some of the interviews. So pretty much just got the ball rolling with him. And as far as Buff, I love Buff. I brought him to a
Mm.
convention a few years ago. He's awesome. What a storyteller. My God, just you give him another guy like Lawler, you give him an inch and he's got a
Yeah.
great story. It's like, hey, what did JR say that about your mom for that she called out? And then, shoo, you
Yeah.
got an awesome story and really, really passionate guy, but he's a great storyteller. Buff is great.
Yeah. He was, I think I only maybe asked him, it was like 40 minutes. I think I only maybe got two questions and he was like, Hannibal and fuck JR, Jim Ross, you fucking idiot, and all this kind of stuff. He just went off the fucking wall. It was brilliant though.
Sometimes though those are the best because it's just like, I'm just gonna sit back and let this guy be
Yeah.
himself and be awesome. Because I mean, he is a great interview. So it's like,
Hmm.
like just you do you be you and nail this thing. So it's also sometimes awesome just to sit back and listen to the talk. Because I interviewed
Yeah.
Bob Zamuda, who was the right hand man of Andy Kaufman years ago. And he played Tony Clifton a bunch too, of course. But I asked him a question about Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman. He gave me like a 20-minute answer. Just whoops, sorry. Just a
Yeah.
huge long answer. And it was like, what in the world? Like that was fucking awesome. Like that was a great I mean, I didn't have to ask him anything. Then he goes, and this happened, then that happened. It was almost like he was following up doing the questions that I was going to say or that we should be asking him, and he
Mm.
just went ahead and asked. So sometimes that's like the most fun to me. I was like, because I'll never forget them. Like that was an awesome answer. Holy shit!
Yeah, yeah. And what are your plans kind of going forward with the channel? Like, what do you set yourself targets? Like, the best advice I ever was given for my YouTube channel was set yourself targets. So that's what I do. What way do you look at things in that regards?
I always just think of like you set goals like I want to be maybe part of a bigger network, or I want to get on this channel, or I want to make this certain amount of money or this certain amount of profit for the year. I always do a list of guys I'd like to interview for the year and kind of check them off. So I kind of do it in different ways. That's great though. The YouTube thing, you set a target, you reach your goal. Obviously, you don't want to set your goals so far and like unattainable where you
Yeah,
don't reach them either, because then that mentally will kind of slow you down and bog you down. Like I didn't reach it, and like I'm a loser or a failure. No, you set your
Mhm.
goals to be more attainable. Then you reach them or you come close to them, and you check them off. It's like that's a win. That's a win. That's a win. Like not that it would be a loss. It's like okay, that's needs improvement or that's something I want to work on and put the arrow towards that one and shoot towards it. So set attainable goals, whether it's clicks or downloads or something like that. Really just try to get the name out there more and really, just do this for fun, but also, make a little profit off of it too. Make a little change off of it.
Yeah, yeah. And so, what way do you normally set up your interviews then? Like, would you record maybe 4 or 5 a month? Would you record 8 a month? Like, how many would you kind of do? Like, I started this podcast just over 2 years ago, and I've been recording interviews for the last 110 weeks straight. So I've done at least two per week for the last two
Wow.
years and six, 2 years, 6 weeks. Yeah, just been going, going, going. Because like I'm just like fuck it. I'm just determined. Because if you slack off YouTube or anything like that, you're fucked. You'll fall off a cliff, won't you?
Yeah. That's the thing too. I always try to stay consistent. It always changes the amount of interviews I do. Like sometimes, like they say the old expression, keep them in the can. Like you have the interviews recorded, they're saved,
Yeah,
they're ready to go, but you just haven't released them yet. So I like to have at least like let's say 6 or 8 in the can just to have them at all times. So when that starts to run thin, then you get the more and you fill that can back up just so you have them and have
hmm,
them have 'em. I never like to get down to like 1 or 2 or something. I always like to have a bunch. At one point,
yeah,
actually recently, I put I think 17, 18, something like that in the can. It was a ton. I put in the can just to have it because I knew I wanted to have a light December because there's so much going on with the kids and
yeah,
Christmas and all this other stuff. So like late November, December, I wanted to keep it light and not record as much. But at one point this year, probably a few months ago, I had 17 or 18 in the can that were just sitting there ready to be released because I knew I was going to take it lighter. But that means in January, I'm going to start ramping them up again and start filling up the
yeah,
canister, filling up the can again because I never want to get low. I always think better have too much than too little because if you're scrambling and stuff, that's if first of all, it's no fun either. You know what I mean? It's like, oh shit, I got
yeah,
to get this out. And when you're kind of rush content and you feel like it's like you're like a slave to it, you got to do it. It's not fun and it's not going to come out that great. It's just going to be like, that was kind of like, oh, I had to do it. Like there wasn't a good effort. When you're putting them in the can and stuff, I don't know. It's always fun because he's going to be like, I'll release that next week or 2 weeks, or maybe I'll release it tomorrow. Whatever kind of comes to your mind, but it makes it so much more fun when you just are free flowing with the content and not pressuring yourself. And it's sometimes when I'm thinking to myself, I want to have 17 or 18 in the can or, whatever it is. Sometimes it's just fun. It's like, all right, if one guy said no, or if the third party screws me, all right, I
yeah,
got the next guy, So sometimes it's kind of more fun doing it that way.
yeah. I think we'll end tonight by saying, fuck the third parties.
Oh man, I
Look,
hate
John,
dealing with them. What a pain in
uh,
the ass. Ugh.
if people want to follow your channel, I'm sure they know anyway, but you want to just give us a shout out, I'll put the links underneath this video.
Sure, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Two Man Power Trip. Check out the website, tmptempire.com, Patreon, patreon.com/tmptempire, tpublic.com/store/tmpt for some cool t-shirts, cool swag like the Two Man Power Trip sweatshirt. Got to have it on because it's getting cold over here in New Jersey. So
Yeah,
I think that's, oh, and then obviously YouTube. Check us out, Two Man Power Trip of Wrestling. I'm trying to think what else got going on. I think that's pretty much it on the plug-roonies there.
yeah. John, absolute pleasure to chat to you today, man. I'm sure we'll be catching up again sometime soon.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.
No problem, man.